Welcome back. Today we're exploring a chilling case that shook the quiet farmlands of Monroe County, Missouri in the spring of 2018. It's late April, and the soft evening light stretches over dusty back roads and rolling pastures. The wind rustles the budding leaves, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and the distant hum of farm machinery. In this tranquil setting, a horrific discovery comes into focus. On April 27, 2018, at approximately 9:45 p.m., a motorist traveling along a gravel road near the tiny community of Santa Fe calls 911 after spotting something off to the side beneath a thin cluster of trees. The first responding officer, who arrives about 20 minutes later, steps out of his patrol car and walks toward the scene with a heavy flashlight beam dancing across the dirt and foliage. He freezes as soon as he realizes what he's found: the body of a young woman lying face up, her long hair partially covering her pale face, a dark wound staining her clothing. This discovery rattles the small local police force. Within an hour, the county sheriff and additional deputies secure the scene. With the body tentatively identified as 35-year-old Molly Watson, the authorities immediately begin the delicate task of documenting every detail. The tire impressions on the edge of the road, the position of her body, and the stillness of the night, broken only by murmured police radio chatter. Molly is known in the area, a kind-hearted woman with a bright future ahead. 2 days from now, she's supposed to be getting married. And not to just anyone, but to a man named James Addy, a middle-aged local corrections officer, well regarded by some, but less known by others. As the investigators wrap the perimeter in yellow crime scene tape, questions swirl through their minds. How could this happen here? In a county where murder is rare and neighbors know each other by first name, the shock will send ripples through the community. Before the weekend is through, suspicions narrow. By Monday morning, the name James Addy hovers heavily over whispered conversations. "All save for the town in the deep south." James narrows his eyes at the graceful cliffs and longs to catch a glimpse of their town tape. Behind the quiet facade of this small-town romance lies a horrific betrayal that no one saw coming, or perhaps just failed to acknowledge. We are about to unravel a twisted narrative, one that will force friends, colleagues, and an entire town to confront dark secrets hidden behind a veneer of normalcy. James Addy is in his early 50s at the time of the murder, standing around 6 feet tall with a sturdy build shaped by years of manual work and the rigors of his job as a corrections officer. He has a strong jawline, thin lips pressed habitually into a neutral expression, and light brown hair that's just starting to show strands of gray at the temples. People often note that he holds himself stiffly, shoulders squared, gazed somewhat distant. There is a small scar above his left eyebrow, rumored to have come from a childhood accident. His presence, both in uniform and out, carries a certain authority. He's not the type to laugh loudly or engage in idle banter at the local diner. Instead, he nods curtly, pays the bill, and leaves without much fanfare. In his past, however, there are whisperings of a troubled history. Born and raised in a modest family setting in central Missouri, James grows up under a father described as stern and physically intimidating, a disciplinarian who rarely offered praise. The family's financial situation hovers on the edge of hardship. James learns early that money does not come easy, and that trust is earned by silence and obedience. He attends a local high school, is an average student at best, and does not pursue college. Instead, he joins a series of blue-collar jobs before settling into a stable career within the state's corrections system. By his 30s, he is a long-time employee at the Moberly Correctional Center, responsible for inmate supervision and security. He has spent decades navigating the tense environment of bars and locked doors, learning how to maintain composure, issue orders, and keep dangerous men in check. In social situations, James is guarded. The people who know him say he rarely opens up about personal matters. He does, however, show a certain pride in his steady job, his home, and his simple hobbies. He is known to enjoy fishing along the smaller streams and occasionally tinkering with old cars. Financially, he manages to maintain a modest home not far from the rural roads where Molly will be found. Yet, over the years, he marries and divorces, marries again, and struggles to maintain stable, loving relationships. Rumor in town is that his marriages end because of James's inability to express affection or compromise, though there's also talk of infidelity and trust issues. He is not known to have a diagnosed mental illness, but colleagues recall moments of simmering anger, the kind that signals trouble if pushed too hard. Early warning signs of troubling behavior slip by unnoticed. A neighbor once mentions overhearing James yelling at a partner late at night. A coworker notes that he once bragged about knowing how to handle disobedience. At the time, it's chalked up to macho posturing, rather than genuine violence. He maintains a facade of a working-class man going about his life, but beneath that exterior, something dormant lingers. Molly Watson, on the other hand, stands in stark contrast. She's 35, of medium height, with warm eyes and an easy smile. She has a slight frame and a penchant for floral dresses that make her appear as soft as the spring breeze. Raised in a loving family environment, Molly's parents instilled in her the value of kindness, honesty, and community support. She works in a nearby town, in a clerical position, well-liked by colleagues who appreciate her helpful nature. Although not wealthy, Molly manages her finances responsibly and dreams of a quiet, stable future. She wants a life that includes marriage, maybe children, and a home where laughter comes easily. She remains close to her siblings, chats with cousins over weekend barbecues, and attends church on Sundays. She is known for volunteering at the local library's Children's Reading Hour and occasionally helping at community fundraisers. By early 2018, Molly's social circle is abuzz with the news of her upcoming wedding. She has shown off her engagement ring, a modest piece, but one she treasures. She frequently speaks of James as the man who finally understands her. He's stable, employed, and ready to settle down. For Molly, who has endured a series of unremarkable relationships, James's steady presence seems like a gift. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, friends note that she appears happy, if somewhat stressed by the typical pre-wedding jitters. She is busy finalizing floral arrangements, picking up her wedding dress, and confirming the guest list. Her future plans include stepping away from her current job eventually to start a family. The day she's found dead, she had just finished running a few last-minute errands, including confirming the reception details at a local hall known for its rustic charm. Molly knows James through the tangled web of small-town connections. They meet at a local event. Some say it was a charity function, others claim it was a fish fry, and begin dating quietly. She is drawn to his quiet confidence, interpreting his stoicism as maturity. He, in turn, presents himself as dependable, a man who will always pay the bills on time and keep a roof over their heads. Few suspect that he is still married to someone else. Fewer still question the subtle inconsistencies in his stories, where he's been, with whom, and why he avoids certain public appearances. In these final months, Molly's life undergoes significant changes. New household items purchased for their future home, a reassessment of personal goals, and a belief that real happiness is finally at hand. In 2018, Monroe County, Missouri, is a patchwork of small towns and farmland. The population is sparse, the pace of life slower than in the bustling cities. Rolling hills stretch beneath open skies, and winding two-lane roads lead to communities where everyone knows everyone else. The largest nearby city is Columbia, about an hour's drive away, but here in the quieter heartland, people rely on their neighbors. It's a conservative area, where church socials and county fairs remain central to the social calendar. The economy is stable but not booming. Most people work in agriculture, education, local businesses, or commute to nearby towns for employment. In April 2018, the social climate reflects both tradition and change. Younger generations increasingly rely on the internet for entertainment, while older folks lament the fading of old-fashioned values. The weather that week is typical for Missouri in spring, variable with warm sunny days and cooler overcast afternoons. On April 27th, the evening air is a gentle 58 degrees, the humidity low, the breeze mild. Moonlight filters down through the trees where Molly's body is found, illuminating the gravel road in silvery patches. The crime scene itself, tucked away near a remote stretch of county land, has no immediate landmarks beyond a bent fence post and a small creek a few hundred yards away. Before this tragedy, community members rarely locked their doors. Kids played in backyards until dusk without a second thought. Now, as news spreads that a bride-to-be has been murdered just 2 days before her wedding, a cloud of fear and confusion settles over the region. Local radio stations break the news cautiously, and neighbors begin looking at one another differently. Did anyone see something strange on that road Friday night? Has anyone noticed unusual activity at James Addy's property? There aren't many flashy attractions in this corner of Missouri. The talk of the town usually involves the county fair, high school football games, or the price of feed. Local commerce centers around a handful of shops: a family-owned hardware store, a small grocery, and a diner that has served home-cooked meals for decades. That's why the murder is such a jarring event. Violent crime is rare, usually something heard about happening elsewhere. The most significant recent event people recall is the closure of a local factory a year earlier and a debate about whether to consolidate 2 small school districts. The gravel road where Molly's body lies, a narrow ribbon of stone and dust, is now forever etched into community memory. Investigators photograph everything: a broken twig that might have been snapped by a fleeing person, faint tire marks that might reveal a clue. The soft glow of police lights reflects off the weeds, casting long, shifting shadows. For local residents, the sense of safety they've long taken for granted is shattered. The horizon, once an open invitation to wander, now feels ominous. Molly and James first meet in a setting that seems innocuous enough. It's late summer of 2016, during a local volunteer event at a park near Moberly. The sky is clear, families mill about, and children run laughing through the grass. According to a friend of Molly's, she bumps into James near a refreshment table. He's offering to help stack chairs. She's replenishing a tray of cookies. Their conversation is brief and polite. Molly finds him reserved but polite, and James later recalls that Molly's laugh sounds genuine, lacking any pretense. Initial interactions unfold slowly. After their first meeting, weeks pass before Molly sees him again. This time it's at a community fish fry fundraiser at a local church. They chat about mundane things, work schedules, the mild weather, and the quality of the catfish on offer. Molly's friend notices that James lingers longer than necessary, as if waiting for Molly to extend an invitation to talk more. Soon, they exchange phone numbers. Casual coffee dates turn into dinners. Molly is delighted by his reliability. He shows up on time, insists on paying the check, and walks her to her car. She appreciates that he doesn't pressure her, that he seems content to let the relationship develop at a measured pace. By early 2017, they begin dating steadily. They share meals at small-town restaurants, go fishing by a local creek, mostly at James's insistence, and watch old movies at Molly's place. She introduces him to her parents in mid-2017, and they find him somewhat quiet, but not off-putting. They don't know about his past marriages, or that he's still legally tied to another woman. Molly's mother comments that James isn't particularly chatty, but Molly laughs it off, saying he's just a private person who's seen a lot at work. James frames himself as a protector figure, someone who understands the hardness of the world and will shield Molly from it. Their relationship seems to progress methodically. By late 2017, Molly starts telling close friends that James might be the one. He is attentive enough to her needs. He helps fix a leaky faucet in her home, suggests they open a joint savings account once they're married, and even drops hints about wanting a child. However, there are subtle red flags that Molly overlooks. He never wants to introduce her to his extended family. He avoids social media altogether, claiming he hates the invasion of privacy. He sometimes cancels plans at the last minute with vague explanations about work emergencies. Friends worry quietly that Molly is rushing. She's in her mid-30s and worried she might miss her chance at marriage and children. Perhaps this blinds her to warning signs. Others around them note oddities. A coworker of James mentions that he's different lately, checking his phone more often, sometimes growing irritable at minor inconveniences. Molly's sister once spots James at a hardware store, accompanied by a woman she doesn't recognize, though she chalks it up to a misunderstanding. The couple rarely attends bigger community gatherings together. When asked, James says he prefers smaller, quieter outings. As 2018 begins, wedding plans kick into high gear. They settle on a date, April 29, 2018, and Molly is ecstatic. She picks out a simple wedding dress, reserves a small banquet hall, and sends out invitations to family and close friends. James, however, seems strangely uninvolved in the details, leaving Molly to handle most arrangements. While some grooms prefer to step back, James's distance feels more than just apathy. He grows evasive. He forgets to pick up his tailored suit on time. He seems anxious whenever the conversation turns to marriage licenses or paperwork. Friends try gently to intervene, encouraging Molly to ask more questions about James's background. She dismisses their concerns, attributing his nervousness to last-minute wedding stress. A mutual acquaintance tries to pull James aside at a local bar one evening, warning him that marriage is a serious commitment and Molly deserves honesty. James responds curtly and leaves. Another subtle alarm. Molly finds a receipt from a motel in his truck, dated just weeks before the wedding. He claims it was work, a last-minute training he had to attend. Molly wants to believe him, so she does. Tension builds. Days before the wedding, James becomes quieter, if that's even possible. Molly's best friend tries to convince her to hold off, to talk openly with James about his past and any lingering doubts. Molly promises she will, right after the wedding. She believes a ring on their fingers will reassure her that everything is legitimate. Finally, it works. And after enough months to maintain a healthy, bracing relationship, Molly takes her husband to the widow's house for the wedding to get married. 2 nights before the wedding, on April 27th, the night Molly is killed, she sends a text to her maid of honor. "I'm nervous, but I'm sure it's just pre-wedding jitters." In retrospect, all the warning signs are there. James's secretive nature, his reluctance to talk about his family, the unexplained motel receipts, and his quiet evasiveness about certain details. Others see hints of his temper simmering beneath a calm veneer. Had anyone pushed harder, demanded answers, perhaps Molly would still be alive. But in small towns, confrontation is uncomfortable. People trust one another, give each other space. Unfortunately, that trust and lack of direct questioning allows the crisis to escalate unchecked. The final weeks before the murder bring a series of trigger events. James, still legally married to another woman, fears exposure. He receives a piece of mail related to his marriage license and panics that Molly will discover his secret. Instead of confessing, he grows resentful and feels cornered by the impending wedding date. Attempts to resolve their differences are minimal. James avoids serious conversation, while Molly, consumed by seating charts and floral arrangements, fails to notice how tense he's become. James experiences escalating behaviors behind the scenes. He starts researching ways to get rid of a person quietly. Neighbors recall seeing his truck parked in unfamiliar spots late at night. He stops calling his close relatives, withdrawing further into himself. Molly, meanwhile, begins to worry because James seems so distant. She mentions to a co-worker that James isn't as excited as I thought he'd be. It's not a direct cry for help, but a subtle sign that something's off. The coworker advises Molly to sit him down and talk it out, but she never finds the right moment. Friends try to help. Molly's sister attempts to take Molly aside to review the situation, urging her to ask James about his past relationships and clarify why she's never met his family. Molly brushes it off with a nervous laugh. After all, it's 2 days before the wedding. Everything is set. Canceling would be humiliating. There are near-miss incidents, moments that might have changed fate. One evening, a few days before the murder, Molly plans a surprise visit to James's home. If she had arrived just a bit earlier, she might have caught him burning letters in a backyard fire pit. These letters, as investigators later theorize, could have contained information about his other marriage. Another time, Molly's brother stops by unexpectedly, to talk wedding details, and glimpses a strange look on James's face, a mixture of panic and resolve. But he says nothing, attributing it to nerves. James issues subtle threats. He tells Molly not to pry into his personal business, that he values his privacy. She thinks he's just stressed, not recognizing the underlying menace. When a friend jokingly teases James about locking it down after the wedding, James responds with an icy stare. Later, at a store, James refuses to engage with a clerk who asks about the upcoming nuptials, walking away muttering something under his breath. Molly never seeks help from authorities or domestic abuse hotlines because she doesn't believe she's in danger. She's happy, if a bit nervous, about the future. Sadly, others who might have intervened don't see enough concrete reason to do so. There are missed opportunities. A family member could have demanded to see James's divorce papers. A friend could have followed up on those odd motel receipts. A co-worker could have encouraged Molly to postpone the wedding until she got satisfactory answers. But it's a rural community, and people hesitate to intrude on what they view as private matters. By April 27th, the final warning signs appear. James avoids all calls from Molly that afternoon. When she finally drives out to meet him later that night, possibly at his request, she doesn't tell anyone where she's going. Witnesses later recall seeing her car heading down that gravel road around 9:30 p.m. She's wearing casual clothes, not her wedding ring hidden somewhere in the car, ready to show him that their big day is near. The wind is calm, the sky clear, and the crickets chirp softly. Molly's heart might be fluttering with anticipation, thinking they'll talk and smooth things over. Instead, she steps into a deadly trap. It's April 27th, 2018, around 9:30 p.m. The moonlight is bright enough to cast shadows on the rural road where Molly's car rolls to a stop. The air is crisp and carries a faint scent of grass and damp soil. Molly steps out, looking around for James. It's quiet, dearly so. The distant hum of a distant highway barely registers. She might call out his name softly, "James! I'm here." James emerges from the darkness, tense and grim. He's chosen this location carefully, a secluded stretch of gravel road bordered by thin woods and farmland beyond. Few pass by this late. The conversation that follows is lost to history, but investigators imagine it involves Molly's confusion. She might question why they're meeting here, why he's acting distant. He provides no comforting words. Instead, he draws a firearm. Investigators later determine it's a handgun and aims it at Molly. She may not have time to scream or run. The shot cracks through the still night air, startling distant wildlife. A second shot ensures she won't survive. The weather is unremarkable, mild, no rain. The sort of night when one might step out on the porch to appreciate the stars. But now it's a scene of horror. Molly's body collapses onto the earth. James lingers only long enough to ensure no one is around. He might quickly pick up any items that could identify him. Within minutes, he's back in his truck and gone, the taillights disappearing into the darkness, his absence preventing the scene from showing in her girl's eyes. At approximately 9:45 p.m., a passing motorist spots something suspicious, a car pulled to the side, a figure on the ground. The motorist slows and shines their headlights. Their gasp is immediate. Within minutes, the first 911 call goes out. The responding officer arrives by 10:05 p.m., heart pounding, as he approaches the scene. He finds Molly Watson's body, lifeless, a wedding date looming that she'll never see. Police secure the area and begin searching for evidence. They notice the tire marks, the shell casings, and Molly's belongings scattered nearby. They find her phone, which doesn't show anything remarkable. A few missed calls, some text messages not yet read. The officer radios for backup. Soon the sheriff's department vehicles line the roadside, their flashing lights bathing the crime scene in red and blue. Suspicions quickly turn to the fiancé. Tragedies like this often point towards someone close to the victim. By early morning, investigators learned that Molly was set to marry James Addy in 2 days. That raises immediate red flags. A bride to be murdered on the eve of her wedding often signals domestic conflict. Officers contact James, who seems oddly composed if a bit guarded. When they reach him at his home around dawn, they note his demeanor, the inconsistencies in his responses, and a distinct lack of visible grief. Blood spatters, shoe prints, and the position of the bullet wounds tell a partial story. Forensic teams arrive as the sun creeps over the horizon. They photograph the scene, bag evidence, and carefully remove Molly's body to the medical examiner's office. Witness accounts are scarce. No one else claims to have seen the shooting, and the deserted road offers few clues. But the investigators have a strong suspicion James Addy is their prime suspect from day one. From the moment the crime is discovered, the Monroe County Sheriff's Office implements standard homicide protocols. Deputies cordon off a large perimeter around the scene, carefully documenting every piece of potential evidence. The Missouri State Highway Patrol's crime scene unit assists with forensic collection, taking plaster casts of tire tracks, lifting latent footprints from a patch of mud, and swabbing nearby surfaces for DNA. Investigators gather Molly's phone records and review her recent communications. They note that she was excited about her upcoming wedding, texting friends about the event just hours before her death. No obvious enemies emerge, and no texts suggest meeting someone else that night. Attention returns to James Addy. Within the next 24 hours, detectives interview Molly's family and friends. They learn of James's evasive nature, his reluctance to engage in wedding plans, and his secretive habits. Forensic findings prove crucial. Ballistics experts determine that Molly was killed with a small-caliber handgun, likely a .22 or a .380. Authorities canvass local stores to see if anyone remembers James purchasing ammunition. Meanwhile, forensic techs analyze Molly's clothing for gunshot residue, examine her car's interior for prints, and review surveillance footage from nearby roads, though, in rural areas, surveillance is scant. Witness interviews prove challenging. Most people have little to add. Still, a neighbor recalls seeing James's truck heading out around 9 p.m. that night. Another notes that James seemed strangely on edge the week prior. Molly's friend reveals that Molly was concerned about James's distant attitude, although she never thought he'd harm her. Detectives attempt to piece together a timeline. Molly leaves her home around 8:45 p.m. to meet James, according to a text she sent to a friend. She arrives at the gravel road location shortly before 9:30 p.m. The murder likely occurs within minutes. Suspect interrogation begins by April 29. James denies involvement, feigning ignorance and shock at Molly's death. He claims he was home alone. Investigators note inconsistencies. He can't confirm what show he was watching, offers no solid alibi, and appears annoyed rather than devastated. As the questioning intensifies, James's story frays at the edges. Search warrants follow. Investigators search James's home, looking for firearms, ammunition, and any documents related to Molly or the wedding. They discover items that cast doubt on his claims. Letters suggesting he never finalized his divorce from his previous wife, suspicious receipts, and internet search history pointing toward violent resolutions to personal conflicts. Expert consultations with forensic psychologists suggest that James's stoic demeanor might mask deep-seated fear of being exposed as a bigamist. This motive aligns with a scenario where he kills Molly to avoid scandal and financial burdens. Breaking developments emerge when ballistics match a gun found hidden in James's garage crawlspace to the shell casings at the crime scene. DNA tests link fibers found on Molly's clothing to upholstery in James's truck. Detectives confirm that James's previous marriage is still legally binding. This explains the motive. Confronted with a wedding that would spotlight his fraudulent situation, James panics and chooses murder over truth. On May 12, James Addy is arrested at his home. The details of his arrest are quiet. No dramatic chase or gunfire. Handcuffed and placed in the back of a patrol car, he maintains a stoic front, offering no confession. Charges are filed swiftly: first-degree murder and armed criminal action. The legal proceedings unfold over the following months and into 2019 and beyond. James appears in court for preliminary hearings wearing an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the ankles. The prosecution files charges of first-degree murder, arguing premeditation and motive. The defense, court-appointed, tries to cast doubt on the timeline and the forensic evidence. They claim there's no direct eyewitness to the shooting and that circumstantial evidence cannot conclusively prove James's guilt. Nonetheless, the prosecution is confident. They have physical evidence, inconsistent statements, and a clear motive. During the trial, which starts in early 2021, witness testimonies paint a picture of James as a deceptive figure who misled Molly into believing he was free to marry. Several of Molly's friends testify about her optimism, her upcoming wedding, and James's strange aloofness. The forensic experts take the stand, detailing how ballistics match the murder weapon to James's hidden gun. The pathologist describes the fatal wounds, causing Molly's family to weep quietly in the gallery. Defense strategy centers on suggesting that someone else could have killed Molly. They produce no alternate suspect, but imply that the lack of direct eyewitnesses means no one can be sure who pulled the trigger. The prosecution counters with a mountain of circumstantial evidence, phone records and financial documents showing James's desperation. Prosecutors highlight James's deception, illustrating that he stood to lose everything: his reputation, financial stability, and possibly face legal consequences for bigamy if Molly discovered the truth. After days of testimony, the jury deliberates. In late April 2021, they return with a guilty verdict on the charge of first-degree murder. The judge sentences James Addy to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The defense files appeals, but given the strength of the evidence, few believe the outcome will change. In the aftermath, the victims' families are left shattered. Molly's parents, who expected to celebrate a wedding, now plan a funeral and memorial service. The community, once so trusting, feels the sting of betrayal. The media coverage is extensive, with local news outlets following the trial closely and occasionally attracting statewide attention. Small communities rarely encounter such a premeditated and callous crime, so this case leaves a lingering scar. Long-term effects ripple through Monroe County. Residents become more cautious about who they trust. Churches hold candlelight vigils for Molly. Local organizations encourage people to speak up if they notice warning signs of domestic abuse or suspicious behavior in relationships. Some citizens push for legislative changes to tighten background checks on marriage licenses, though these measures meet with mixed results. Memorial services for Molly take place in a small church where she once sang in the choir. Friends and family share memories of her kindness, her laugh, and her dreams for a simple, happy life. The community establishes a scholarship fund in her name, designed to help local women pursue higher education. Over time, this fund becomes a quiet but lasting legacy, turning tragedy into a source of future hope. Media coverage eventually wanes, but true crime enthusiasts continue to discuss the case online, dissecting details and exploring the psychological profile of James Addy. Experts highlight the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships. Domestic violence awareness programs mention the case as a reminder that danger can lurk even where it's least expected. The legacy of this case is a cautionary tale. It shows that beneath the surface of calm rural life, dark secrets can breed unimaginable violence. People whisper about the bride who never made it to the altar, ensuring that Molly Watson's story isn't forgotten. Meanwhile, James Addy sits in prison, a grim reminder that lies and desperation can lead to unspeakable acts. As we reflect on the case, it's clear that it alters the community's perception of safety and trust. The tragedy sparks dialogues about intervention, the need to ask hard questions, and to believe victims when they sense something amiss. The legal proceedings and the subsequent conviction reassure the community that justice, though painfully slow, can be achieved. But no sentence can bring Molly back or erase the grief her loved ones endure. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories. In the comments below, share your thoughts on this case, discuss similar cases you know, and consider how communities can protect themselves from predators who hide behind a facade of normalcy. This story of betrayal and murder doesn't just end with a verdict. It continues to resonate, prompting deeper questions about love, trust, and the lengths they go to protect their secrets. If you found this case compelling, you might also be interested in learning about other tragic stories of deception and violence that have shaken seemingly peaceful communities. We encourage you to leave your opinions, experiences, and related discussions below, fostering a community dedicated to awareness and prevention.